first message arrived on a Tuesday evening in November, exactly 3 months after Maria had watched her father's casket disappear into the cold earth. She was sitting at her kitchen table, picking at leftover takeout while scrolling through social media, when her phone buzzed against the wooden surface. The sound made her jump. She had been living in a constant state of nervous energy since the funeral, every unexpected noise sending her heart racing. When she glanced at the screen, her chopsticks clattered to the floor. "Dad, mobile, happy birthday, sunshine. I know it's early, but I wanted to be the first to say it. Hope you're taking care of yourself." Maria's birthday was still 2 days away. Her hands began to shake as she stared at the glowing screen, her father's contact photo smiling back at her, a picture she had taken of him just months before his heart attack, when he was still vibrant and full of life, his eyes crinkling with the laughter lines she had inherited. The nickname Sunshine hit her like a physical blow. He had called her that since she was 3 years old, when she would wake up every morning and run to his bedroom, bouncing on the bed and declaring it was time for sunshine time. She set the phone down carefully, as if it might explode. Her rational mind scrambled for explanations. Phone companies sometimes had delays in disconnecting service. Maybe it was some kind of automated birthday reminder he had set up before he died. But even as she thought it, she knew it made no sense. Her father, Robert Chin, had been many things: a devoted accountant, a weekend gardener, a man who told the same 3 jokes at every family gathering, but he was not someone who set up elaborate phone reminders. The funeral felt like both yesterday and a lifetime ago. Maria could still smell the white lilies that had covered his casket, still feel the rough texture of the tissues her mother had pressed into her palm as they stood by the graveside. Her father had always been the steady one in their family, the one who fixed leaky faucets and remembered to change the air filters and never forgot to call on birthdays. His sudden death at 58 had left a hole in their world that seemed to grow larger each day. Now, staring at his message, Maria felt something crack open inside her chest, a mixture of hope and terror that made her feel like she might throw up or cry or both. She screenshot the message immediately, her fingers fumbling with the phone's controls, afraid it might disappear if she didn't capture proof of its existence. She called her mother first. Helen Chin answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the same hollow quality it had held since the funeral. "Mom, did you get Dad's phone disconnected?" Maria asked without preamble. "What? No, honey, I keep meaning to call Verizon, but Helen's voice trailed off. "Why? What's wrong?" Maria read the message aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. The silence on the other end of the line stretched so long that Maria wondered if the call had dropped. "That's not possible," Helen finally said, but her voice was uncertain. "His phone it's buried with him. I put it in his jacket pocket myself, right before they closed the casket. He always kept it there. They had decided to bury him with his phone because it seemed wrong to leave behind something he had carried every day for years. It was a small thing, but grief made people hold on to small things." Maria remembered how her mother's hands had shaken as she slipped the device into his breast pocket, how she had whispered something to him that Maria couldn't hear. "Maybe it's some kind of mistake," Helen continued, but she didn't sound convinced. "Maybe the phone company is confused, or someone got his number by accident." But they both knew that didn't explain the nickname. Sunshine was not written down anywhere, not in any contact list or email signature. It lived only in the space between father and daughter, in 28 years of birthday mornings and bedtime stories and quiet conversations in the car. Maria hung up after promising to call the phone company in the morning, but she couldn't stop staring at the message. She read it over and over until the words started to lose meaning, until Sunshine became just a collection of letters that happened to make her cry. On her actual birthday, 2 days later, she woke up to find 3 new messages waiting for her. "Dad, mobile, remember when you turned 7 and insisted on having a rainbow cake? Your mother spent all day mixing food coloring, and it turned out brown. You ate 3 pieces anyway and said it was the best cake ever. Dad, mobile, you're probably wondering how this is possible. I don't understand it either, but I wanted you to know I'm still here, still watching over my sunshine. Dad, mobile, don't tell your mother about these messages yet. She's not ready. But you are always the strong one, Maria. You can handle this. Maria sat in her bed, tears streaming down her face as she read the messages. The rainbow cake memory was absolutely true. She could still remember the disappointment on her mother's face when all the beautiful colors had mixed together into an unappetizing brown mess, and her own 7-year-old determination to make her mother feel better by eating as much as possible. It was not the kind of story that got repeated at family gatherings or written in baby books. It was just a small moment, the kind that only existed in the private history between a father and daughter. The messages continued sporadically over the following weeks. They came at strange times, during her lunch break at the insurance office where she worked, late at night when she couldn't sleep, early in the morning before her alarm went off. Each message contained some piece of personal history that made her gasp with recognition. Dad, Mobile, I saw you got the promotion at work. I'm proud of you, but don't let them work you too hard. Remember what I always said about balance. This message arrived the day after she had been promoted to senior claims adjuster, before she had told anyone except her immediate supervisor. Her father had indeed always lectured her about work-life balance, often calling her at the office to ask if she had eaten lunch or reminding her that staying late every night wouldn't impress anyone who mattered. Dad, Mobile, your Uncle Tommy is having money troubles again. He's too proud to ask for help, but maybe you could suggest a family dinner? Your mother misses cooking for more people. Maria hadn't spoken to her Uncle Tommy in months, but when she called him on a whim, he broke down and admitted he was behind on his mortgage payments. It was exactly the kind of insight her father would have had. He had always been the one who noticed when family members were struggling, who found gentle ways to offer help without making anyone feel small. Dad, Mobile, I know you're scared about the surgery. But Dr. Peterson is good, and your mother needs you to be brave for her. This message arrived the night before her mother's gallbladder surgery, which Maria had been dreading for weeks. Dr. Peterson was indeed their surgeon, and Maria had been trying to hide her anxiety so her mother wouldn't worry. But her father had always been able to see through her attempts to be strong. With each message, Maria felt herself being pulled deeper into a reality that made no sense but felt completely real. She began to look forward to the texts, checking her phone constantly, feeling disappointed when days passed without hearing from him. She started responding to the messages, typing out long paragraphs about her life, her fears, her grief. She never received replies to her responses, but somehow that made it feel more real. Her father had never been much of a texter when he was alive. He preferred phone calls or face-to-face conversations. The messages felt like him reaching out in the only way he could, not necessarily able to engage in back-and-forth conversation, but still present, still caring, still watching over her. The messages became more frequent around the anniversary of his death. They offered comfort during her darkest moments, when the grief felt like it might swallow her whole. Dad, Mobile, I know you miss me. I miss you too, sunshine. But I need you to keep living your life. Don't get stuck in the sadness. Dad, Mobile, your mother is stronger than you think, but she needs to see you moving forward. Be your example of how to heal. Dad, Mobile, remember that time you asked me if I'd ever really leave you? I told you I'd always be in your heart. I meant it then, and I mean it now. Maria did remember that conversation. She had been 8 years old, scared by something she had seen on television about death. Her father had sat with her on the porch swing, explaining in gentle terms that love didn't end when someone died, that the people we love become part of us in ways that can never be taken away. The messages helped her through the anniversary, through the holidays, through the countless small moments when grief would hit her like a wave. They came when she needed them most, always at the right time, always saying exactly what she needed to hear. But as months passed, Maria began to feel a growing unease. The messages were becoming more detailed, more specific about current events that her father couldn't possibly know about. They referenced conversations she had with friends he had never met, mentioned news stories that had happened after his death, showed knowledge of things that existed only in her present life. Dad, Mobile, I know you're thinking about taking that job in Seattle. It's a good opportunity, but remember what I always said about being close to family. Your mother won't say it, but she needs you nearby right now. Maria had only told 2 people about the Seattle job offer, her best friend Jessica and her coworker Mike. The opportunity had come up through a headhunter just a week before, and she was still deciding whether to even take the interview. Her father had indeed always valued family proximity, often saying that career success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. "Dad, Mobile, I see you're dating someone new. Take it slow, sunshine. You have a good heart, but you don't have to heal his wounds for him. You learned that lesson with David." This message made Maria's blood run cold. She had been on exactly 3 dates with a guy named Alex, and she hadn't told anyone about him yet. The reference to David, her ex-boyfriend from 2 years ago, was accurate. She had indeed tried to fix his problems and had learned a painful lesson about the difference between love and codependency. But these were not things her father would know about from beyond the grave. The doubt that had been growing in her mind began to crystallize into something more concrete. She started to analyze the messages more carefully, looking for patterns, for clues about their true origin. The writing style was remarkably consistent with her father's manner of speaking, his tendency to use endearments, his habit of offering advice through storytelling, his gentle way of expressing concern. But there were subtle differences too, small things that nagged at her subconscious. Her father had always been somewhat formal in his written communication, a product of his generation and his professional background. But these messages were more casual, more contemporary in their phrasing. He had never used certain abbreviations or expressions that appeared in the texts. Most tellingly, he had always signed his messages with "Love, Dad" when he was alive, but these mysterious messages never had any signature at all. Maria began to keep a notebook, documenting each message along with the circumstances of her life when it arrived. Patterns emerged that made her increasingly uncomfortable. The messages always seemed to arrive when she was going through something difficult, when she was most vulnerable, most in need of comfort. They demonstrated knowledge of her private conversations, her work situation, her romantic life, information that would be available to someone who had access to her social media, her phone records, her daily routines. The realization crept over her slowly, like a fog rolling in from the ocean. Someone was watching her, studying her, crafting these messages to provide exactly the kind of comfort she needed. Someone who knew her well enough to understand her father's communication style, who had access to their shared memories, who could mimic his voice convincingly enough to fool a grieving daughter desperate to believe her father was still present in her life. The truth hit her on a Thursday evening in March, almost 6 months after the first message. She was having dinner with her extended family, her mother, her Uncle Tommy, her Aunt Sarah, and her cousins. The conversation had turned to memories of her father, the way it always did at family gatherings now. Everyone had stories to share, moments they treasured, things they missed about Robert. Uncle Tommy was in the middle of telling a story about her father's college days when he paused mid-sentence, a strange expression crossing his face. "You know," he said slowly, "I keep thinking about Bob's phone. The one we buried with him. It had so many pictures, so many messages. All those conversations between you two, Maria. I almost thought about..." He stopped, looking uncomfortable. "Thought about what?" Maria asked, though something in her chest was already starting to pound. "Well, before the funeral, I thought about backing up all his photos and messages. You know, for you and your mother. As keepsakes. But it felt like going through his private things. So I didn't." But the way he said it, the way his eyes wouldn't quite meet hers, made Maria realize he was lying. Or at least not telling the whole truth. "Uncle Tommy," she said carefully, "did you do something with Dad's phone before the funeral?" The silence that fell over the dinner table was deafening. Her mother stopped eating, her fork suspended halfway to her mouth. Aunt Sarah stared at her husband with a growing expression of understanding and horror. Tommy's face crumpled. I thought, you were so broken, Maria. And your mother was falling apart. I thought if I could give you some comfort." His voice trailed off as the magnitude of what he was admitting began to sink in. "What did you do?" Maria's voice was barely a whisper. "I cloned his phone," Tommy said, the words coming out in a rush. Before the funeral, when everyone was busy with the arrangements, I used this app. It only took a few minutes. I had access to all his old messages, all your conversations. I thought I could help you heal. I thought I could give you closure. The room seemed to tilt around Maria. All those months of believing, of healing, of feeling connected to her father, it had all been an elaborate deception. Her own uncle had been manipulating her grief, using her love for her father against her, crafting false comfort out of stolen memories. The messages, she said, her voice hollow. All those messages. That was you. Tommy nodded, tears streaming down his face. I studied the way he wrote to you. I had years of conversations to work from. I know it was wrong, but you seemed so much better after they started coming. You started eating again, started sleeping. You went back to work. I thought I was helping. Maria felt like she was drowning. Every moment of comfort those messages had provided now felt tainted, twisted into something ugly and manipulative. The hope she had carried, the belief that love could transcend death, the peace she had found in thinking her father was still watching over her, all of it was built on lies. How did you know about my job, about Alex, about all the things happening in my life? She asked, though she was beginning to understand. I've been keeping an eye on you. On your mother. To know when you might need support. I have access to your social media, and sometimes I would ask casual questions at family gatherings. People talk about their lives, and I listened. I thought I was being helpful. The violation felt complete. Not only had her uncle stolen her father's voice, but he had been surveilling her, studying her, using her own life against her to craft his deception. Every private moment, every struggle, every small victory had been observed and cataloged and used to create false messages from a dead man. Maria, Tommy pleaded, reaching across the table toward her. I never meant to hurt you. I just wanted to help you heal. You were so lost, so broken. The messages made you feel better. Doesn't that count for something? But Maria was already standing, already backing away from the table. The betrayal felt like a physical weight in her chest, making it hard to breathe. She had been lied to, manipulated, deceived by someone she trusted, someone who was supposed to care about her well-being. You made me believe he was still alive, she whispered. You made me believe that death wasn't the end, that love could somehow continue. Do you have any idea what it feels like to lose that hope twice? She left the restaurant without another word, driving home through tears that made the streetlights blur into streaks of light. At home, she pulled out her phone and scrolled through months of messages from her father's number, seeing them now for what they really were, not communications from beyond the grave, but manipulations from a well-meaning relative who had decided he knew better than she did about how to process her grief. The messages that had once brought her such comfort now made her feel sick. Every memory her uncle had referenced, every piece of advice he had offered in her father's voice, every moment of connection she had felt, it was all contaminated by the knowledge of its true source. She spent the night deleting the messages, erasing the evidence of her own gullibility, her desperate need to believe that death was not the final word. But even as she deleted them, she found herself memorizing the words, unable to completely let go of the comfort they had provided, even knowing they were false. In the morning, she blocked her father's number. The decision felt like killing him all over again, but she knew she couldn't risk receiving any more messages. The healing she had experienced over the past months felt hollow now, built on a foundation of lies that had crumbled the moment the truth came to light. The worst part was that her uncle had been right about one thing: the messages had helped her heal. She had started eating again, sleeping better, engaging with life in ways she hadn't been able to do in the immediate aftermath of her father's death. But now she had to question whether that healing was real or just another layer of deception, whether she had actually worked through her grief or simply been distracted from it by false hope. Her relationship with her uncle never recovered. The family tried to move past the incident, treating it as a misguided attempt at kindness rather than the profound violation it actually was. But Maria couldn't forget the months of manipulation, the way her most private grief had been used against her, the theft of her father's voice for purposes he never would have approved of. She eventually found peace again, But it was a different kind of peace, one built on accepting the finality of death rather than hoping for continuation. She learned to treasure her real memories of her father without needing them to be supplemented by false communications. She discovered that healing could happen without the promise of ongoing connection, that love could be meaningful even when it ended with death. But sometimes, late at night, she would find herself missing those messages. Not because she believed they were real, but because they had represented something she desperately wanted to be true. The idea that the people we love never really leave us, that death is not the end of relationship but just a transformation of it. The cruel irony was that her father had been right about that, in a way. He did live on in her heart, in her memories, in the lessons he had taught her and the love he had given her. But that continuation was quiet and internal, not dramatic and external. It required faith rather than proof, acceptance rather than evidence. Maria learned to find comfort in that quieter form of ongoing connection, but she never forgot the lesson her uncle had taught her about the danger of wanting to believe something so badly that you ignore the warning signs that it might not be true. Grief, she realized, could make you vulnerable to many kinds of deception, including the ones you practiced on yourself. The messages from her father's phone had stopped, but the love he had given her continued in ways that no one could fake or manipulate or steal. In the end, that had to be enough.